minutes. 5 minutes.
That's the world's shortest day.
Well, that's what I suggested, something just very short.
Very short it is. Went after the chime. The chime comes first. Do you know?
Now you're going over the intro. I refer to you as doctor or reverend. It looks like we've got your collar on, so maybe it's reverend.
Whatever it is. Or neither. My name is
No, I don't.
They were members of my school.
1 minute. 1 minute.
Good morning. Welcome to our service. We are the Rogue Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, or RUF, in Ashland, Oregon. My name's Roger Best, and I'm a part of RUF because I want to embrace diversity, empower connection, and engage in the work for social justice. And I realize that that's done better together with a group of like-minded and like-spirited folks. I believe those 7 principles up there on the wall are an effective guide and model for action in this work. What's more, our efforts are needed now more than ever, in this time when our ability to engage in this work is being existentially threatened. We're happy to welcome you to our service, both online and in person. We want to especially thank the members of the stream team who are helping make the online service happen, and the members of the neighborhood team who welcome the on-site congregation and provide our coffee hour. If you're a newcomer, we invite you to sign up for our mailing list at rvuuf.org. You'll receive a weekly email that gives you all the information you need to make your decision about whether to join us on Sunday morning in person or by Zoom or online, and about the many other exciting things going on here at RUF. We begin each service by acknowledging that our building is built on land that began as the home of the Calquicumpqua, Takelma, Shasta, and Latgawa people. We remind ourselves that indigenous people are part of our communities, and continue to experience the effects of colonization. We're committed to fighting for the worth and dignity of Indigenous people, both in our community and around the world. These services are a part of that work. We're very happy to have you with us for this service, and we invite you to join in our mission, embracing diversity, empowering connection, and engaging in the work for social justice. This morning, we welcome as our guest speaker, the Reverend Dr. J. Atkinson. Dr. Atkinson retired in 2011 from 32 years of full-time service in Unitarian Universalist parish ministry. Most recently, 12 years in Studio City in the Los Angeles area, and before that, 13 years in Davis, California. During those ministries, he also served at various times on the adjunct faculties of our UU seminaries at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago and Starr King School for the Ministry in Berkeley. Before turning to professional ministry, he did research in nuclear physics for 11 years. Currently, he is a research scholar at Starr King with a focus on UU history.
As we gather for this hour of worship, we kindle this chalice as a symbol of all that we value most deeply. May its dancing flame remind us of the energy and the resilience of the human spirit in times of both joy and grief. May its light be a beacon of truth for all who seek to discover and understand life's deepest meanings and possibilities. May its warmth deepen our bonds with one another in this religious community as we join our hands to work for the common good with integrity, joy, and service. Come, let us worship.
Our opening hymn this morning, oh my, that seems loud. Our opening hymn is in our gray hymnal, number 359. Reverend Atkinson has chosen our hymns this morning, so we are going to be doing this first one that you may not be familiar with, but he may have been singing it in his other congregations. So please rise in body or spirit and let us hear Jane play it for us once so we can join in.
When we are gathered for a time of worship and of song, let none forget the joys and griefs that mark each path of life, and thus we reach for those who love. We reach for those who love.
Grace McLaren, who wrote the words for this. She is a musician and organist that was a longtime administrator in our San Diego First UU Church. And since Jay and I are both from California, we appreciate that.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Suzanne Anderson, and I'm a member of the anti-racism team here at ROOF. And I'm asking myself, what does it mean to be an American? In these times, we are called to confront deep truths. To be an American today is not just a matter of citizenship or birthplace. It's a commitment to seek clarity, to speak truthfully, and to act with courage. It means standing with the disenfranchised, acknowledging that the weight of systemic racism and refusing to look away. It means honoring the dream while also doing the hard work of repair. So I'm asking myself what it means to be an American and what kind of America I am choosing to build. As a Unitarian Universalist, we affirm and promote the worth and dignity of every person. To me, this principle calls us not only to compassion, but to action, and especially in the face of injustice. We are challenged to reconcile our identity with our actions. Immigration has become the battleground where human rights and due process are being denied. But as UUs, we do not turn away. As an American, we must not turn away. We remember our commitment to the interdependent web of all existence, which does not end at the border. To live our values, we must bear witness to their stories and push back against policies and systems rooted in cruelty. This flame we light this week is not only for our comfort, but for our courage, a beacon to guide us towards justice. As Unitarian Universalists, we are grounded in values that demand not silence, but action, not comfort in our understanding, but courage to do something. Here in the U.S., racism persists in our systems, in the streets and in our laws. Marginalized communities are pushed aside, their voices dismissed, and their rights denied. Our faith calls us to do more. It calls for us to act in solidarity for all who have been pushed to the margins with shared belief in our values and principles. This is not easy work, but our faith has never meant to be easy. It was meant to be lived. So let us rise to meet the moment with open hearts, with fierce love and unshakable commitment to the justice that our values demand. As the Mexican-American author and poet Luis Alberto Urrea quoted, "We are the same flesh. We all are sacred. And if we can't see that, we are the ones in need of healing."
It has become a tradition in this faith group to light a candle each week for peace. We seek peace in our own hearts, peace in our families, our communities, and most importantly right now, peace in the world. Today's peace candle reading is from the well-known Buddhist American scholar and teacher, Pema Chodron. The peace that we are looking for is not peace that crumbles as soon as there is difficulty or chaos. Whether we're seeking inner peace or global peace, or a combination of the two, the way to experience it is to build on the foundation of unconditional openness in all that arises. Peace is an experience free of challenge, free of rough and smooth. It's an experience that it's expansive enough to include all that arises without feeling threatened.
Peace of shalom. Peace of shalom. Peace of shalom. Peace of shalom.
Well, let me say how nice it is to be back here. I've preached a couple of times before here, but I think the last time was pre-COVID, so it's been a while. I'm going to do the reading. I am not Marcia, I am Jay. But I'm going to do the reading because it's a bit complicated, and I will need to skip around a bit as I do the reading. This reading is a book, excerpt from a book written by Rebecca Parker and Rita Nakashima Brock. Some of you will recognize the name Rebecca Parker because she was the president of Starr King School for the Ministry for 24 years. I think she held the record for seminary presidencies. It's a fairly volatile profession, and she outlasted a lot of her male colleagues, I will tell you. Before she became president of Starr King, Rebecca was serving a small Methodist church. She grew up in the United Methodist Church. Her father and grandfather had been ministers. And she graduated, and after she got her doctorate, she served for 10 years in the 1980s, a little Methodist church in the Puget Sound area. And this story that she recounts in this book comes from that era. It was the early 1980s, and anti-gay sentiment was heating up in our city. On the national scene, our denomination, meaning United Methodist, was preparing to pass legislation that denied ordination to those who were lesbian and gay. Chuck, a gay man, and Pat, a lesbian woman in the congregation, came up with an idea for what our congregation might do in this climate. Both were active in the church, making important contributions to its life and its ministry, but they had kept a rather low profile about their sexual orientations. They were out only to me and to a few others. Chuck worked for a school district where he would be fired if it were publicly known that he was gay. There were no legal protections in place for him. Chuck and Pat wanted to see the church take a proactive stance in support of lesbians and gays. I liked their idea and invited them to present it at the next board meeting. Tuesday night came around. After preliminary business was taken care of, the board chair called on Chuck and Pat. Each of them came out to the board and told what it was like to be a gay person in a society where the presence of gays was not welcome. They explained how much the church meant to them and how they wanted its fellowship to be more available to people in the gay community. Then they proposed that the church start a support group for lesbians and gays, and that we publish a welcome in the local papers, especially the gay press. The first response was thundering silence. No one said a word. Then Cecil, the lay leader of the congregation, stood up. Cecil had known poverty as a child and the sting of being called poor white trash. He had had to quit school after the 8th grade to go to work. He was a tough survivor, a self-taught man. The tattoos on his arm were from his years in the Merchant Marine. No one ever stood up at board meetings. The meetings tended to be informal, but Cecil cleared his throat to make a speech. "The Bible is perfectly clear on this question," he said, speaking with firmness. I held my breath, said Rebecca. I had no idea where Cecil was going with this. But he went on. Jesus said, "Love your neighbor as yourself." And as far as I know, he put no restrictions on who our neighbor is. I move that we do as Chuck and Pat have proposed. There will be some in our church family who will not understand such an action. It will not fit with their understanding of what it means to be a Christian or of how they read the Bible, and we will lose our relationship with them. But if we do not do this, we will lose our relationship with God. And he sat down. The board members began to talk. They told personal stories of gay friends that they had and what the policies were doing that oppressed them. They talked and talked. Finally, someone said, "Let's vote." The vote was unanimous in favor of the proposal with one abstention. The board asked me to preach a sermon the following Sunday announcing the decision. It was the first Sunday in Advent, and the lectionary text for the day was from the gospel, from the first letter of John. Whoever says, "I am in the light," while hating a brother or sister, is still in the darkness. Whoever loves a brother or sister lives in the light. We have some music to let those words sink in. Whoever loves a brother or sister lives in the light. I don't often begin my sermons with a biblical text, but that one is ideal for what I have to say this morning. And the story of Cecil is also ideal, living in the light of love. We've been talking a lot about love as a central value in Unitarian Universalism these days for quite a long time. We have t-shirts that say siding with love, acting or living on the side of love. And for decades, we've been singing about love in our hymn books. You know some of these hymns. Love will guide us. There is more love somewhere. What wondrous love is this? Answering the call of love. I'm sure you've sung all of those. And a year ago, at our 2024 General Assembly, delegates from UU congregations around the country, 2,500 delegates, voted by a margin of 80%, or amount of 80%, for a new statement of Unitarian Universalist identity. One which replaced the previous principles and sources in Article 2 of the UUA bylaws, and replaced that with 7 values that placed love at the center. Love seems to have been the central value of Jesus' life and ministry. That's what Cecil stood up to remind his friends of in that little Methodist church more than 40 years ago. And if that is true, if love truly is and for a long time has been at the center of Unitarian Universalist feeling and thinking and values, why did Unitarians and Universalists turn their back on Christianity almost 200 years ago in the 19th and 20th centuries? And why do so few UUs today identify themselves as Christians? Well, many of you, I'm sure, know the answer, or at least part of the answer to that question. It's that Christian theology took a really wrong turn, starting way back in 300 AD. So let me put that in some context for you. Oh, are you surprised by that? One of the things that fascinates me about Christian history is how the early Christian church got its start. You might think that this is a question that was just settled long, long ago. After all, that we're talking about something that was happening between 2000 and 1700 years ago. But it's still very much an ongoing topic of research. Here's a book that I came across just a couple of years ago. The title is After Jesus, Before Christianity. So you can guess that it deals with beginning in 30 AD and goes up to about 300 or maybe 400 AD. Those first centuries. The subtitle is A Historical Exploration of the First 2 Centuries of Jesus' Movements. And movements, plural, is significant for the interpretation that they put forward in this book. It wasn't until the early 3rd century that any single coordinated and widespread organization began to emerge that anyone could call Christianity. Instead, there was a congeries of Jesus movements in here and there, and you know, if you remember the letters of St. Paul, he was constantly writing to his congregations in Corinth and Galatia and in Rome, trying to deal with the disputes that they were wrestling with during his lifetime. And it continued into the 2nd century and the 3rd century. There was nothing, according to these interpretations, there was nothing unified that could be called Christianity. There were little communities, and they were all over the map in what they believed. Widely differing ideas about almost everything. And it took yet another century before any theological agreement and what we could call orthodoxy was settled on. And I'm sure many of you know also that it was then that the doctrine of the Trinity was formulated at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when a bunch of creeds were written and the barbaric notion arose that an angry and a vengeful God had to be appeased by Jesus' torture and death in order to pay off the sins of humanity. How could such an idea arise? A monstrous God who demanded agonizing and tortured suffering as a condition for salvation. Who would want to worship a God like that? Why would such a God even be worthy of attention, much less worship? God is a cosmic child abuser that violates every precept of love that we see in the life and the ministry of Jesus. And yet people, well, initially the doctors of the church, as we would call them, and then popular belief adopted the idea. By the 11th century, that doctrine of atonement, which we call penal substitutionary atonement, became the dominant theology of the cross. And it's what I was still hearing in my little Methodist church as a teenager, where I grew up. Maybe Jesus loves me, but God is angry and just wants payback. So let me say it again. This is a baffling, bizarre, and barbaric theology. But I bet it's familiar to some of you. That's probably what some of you rebelled against if you grew up in a Christian church as I did. And it's exactly this kind of thinking and theology that our Unitarian and Universalist ancestors rebelled against. The Unitarians were first, about 460 years ago, way back in the 1560s in Poland, where the first churches to challenge the Trinity were established. And you probably know that similar churches arose about 10 years later in Transylvania, just south across the mountains in what is now Romania. But this morning I'm going to focus not so much on the Unitarian side of our tradition as the Universalist side. Because the Universalists were the ones who tried to bring back Christianity to where they thought it had gone wrong. They specifically lifted up the idea of God as love, and that love is what Christianity is fundamentally all about. Universalist ideas began circulating in the Atlantic colonies in 1740s from German immigrants, but it wasn't until 1774 that the first Universalist congregation was officially established in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and under the ministry of John Murray, an English expat who came to join the Americas in 1770. And about the same time, Universalist congregations were being formed by dissident Methodists and Baptists up and down the Connecticut River Valley. They were tired of hearing about how they were all going to hell. And then it was Hosea Ballou in 1805, in his book, A Treatise on Atonement. He became the principal Universalist theologian really up to the present day. This was a fundamental articulation of Universalist theology. God, he said, is not full of anger, but full of love. And at the end, he said, if we agree in brotherly love, there is no disagreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not agree in brotherly love, then no other agreement can do us any good. That was Hosea Ballou. He argued that Jesus was sent by God to demonstrate and exemplify the true meaning of divine love, not to be a sacrificial victim. And for the Universalists, this was seen as a biblical doctrine, attested by many, many passages in the Christian Bible. I'm sure that you know some of these, but let me just mention a few of them. In the Gospel of Mark, for example, we read that Jesus, in reply to a question, says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your mind and soul and heart and strength. And the second commandment is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." And in the Gospel of John, we read, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You should also love one another." And in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, maybe the most famous of these passages, "Though I speak in the tongues of mortals and angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all the mysteries and knowledge and have all faith, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing." And then a few sentences later, "And now trust, hope, and love abide, these three. and the greatest of these is love. And then a final example from the first letter of John. Let's see, where is this? Here. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. Pretty universalist sounding, isn't it? The idea that God was a loving parent, in the language of the day, was how things stood with both Unitarians and Universalists in the 1830s, about almost 200 years ago now. Both Unitarians and Universalists saw themselves grounded in the Bible, and they embarked on a journey away from rigid orthodoxy, Calvinism, or whatever you want to call it, and they proclaimed instead a liberated, enlightened, and humanistic interpretation of Christianity. And here's the crucial point. Both Unitarians and Universalists looked upon the life of Jesus as an example for human living, a model of ethical relationship and moral behavior. The parables and the sermons that are attributed to Jesus in the Bible were told and retold as moral lessons. The Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, the Sermon on the Mount, they were the substance of preaching in those days, the guiding images for living, for religious living in the hearts of the people. By preaching, I mean Unitarian and Universalists preaching. The hell and brimstone preachers were also there at the same time. But that approach to what Christianity was all about is what I mean in thinking that Jesus and the Universalists really did get it right. Love was the central principle, the unifying force, not just of their lives, but in their theology. And what did love require? Simply that we should live with one another, treat one another in the same way that we would wish to be treated. The golden rule. That's how they began interpreting the most central and fundamental meaning of Christianity as a gospel of love. And then something happened among the Unitarians, and then later among the Universalists. They began to encounter Eastern religions. Hinduism and Buddhism were having their scriptures translated into English, believe it or not, for the very first time in the 1820s and 30s and 40s, and people like Emerson and Thoreau were reading them. And what they discovered was that Buddhism and Hinduism had statements very much like that golden rule, that people should treat each other how they wanted to be treated. And so they began to ask themselves, well, what's so unique about Christianity then? Hindus do the same thing, say the same thing, so do Buddhists. Jews have their own formulation of that, so do Muslims. And it began to seem to Unitarians of that era that Christianity wasn't all that special, all that morally superior to all other religions as they had thought. The idea of a universal ethics began to sound more attractive, something that could unite all the peoples of the world, they hoped. And the importance of the Bible thus began slowly to fade away and to be replaced by a summary of ethical codes of behavior, a list of democratic and liberal values, much like those 7 principles that Roger referred to earlier that hang on the wall of the church here. And you recognize that today. The 7 principles of the UUA bylaws have become, for some people, almost a creed, an object of worship. You might say that we have tended to become more of an ethical philosophy than a religion. But of course, we always did speak of love as a spiritual force. Some of us equate love with God, while others are happy to dispense with the word God altogether and just talk about love. that a good thing? Are we a stronger collection of churches, a stronger and more fulfilling religious tradition as a result of not referring to the life of Jesus all that much anymore? Do we find ourselves more personally inspired by ethical ideals and principles than our forebears were, inspired by the more vivid religious imagery that came from telling and retelling the parables and the sermons and the sayings of Jesus? I think one of the reasons that I find myself reading a lot of Christian theology these days is that for me, our UU religious language, our language of reverence, as we sometimes call it, has become thin. Yes, we talk about love, but how much do we dig into what love really means? How much is that really rooted in a clear theology? There aren't many UU theologians these days who are writing good, solid, and to me exciting and groundbreaking theology. Instead, it's in the liberal, forward-looking, progressive Christianity that I am finding the kinds of innovative and imaginative theological ideas that inspire me, that get my juices flowing, that open up some exciting new ways of understanding the subject matter of theology. And I wonder why it is that I, as a non-Christian, at least most of the time, have to turn to Christian theologians to find such stimulating theology. Well, maybe I'm just weird. Maybe I'm just a theology nerd. But all of our contemporary UU talk about love, like side with love or living on the side of love. I'm not reading any really deep theologies. Instead, it's coming from Christian theologians, and especially from a movement that I want to tell you a little bit about, called open and relational theology. It's a movement that might surprise you that it's coming out of evangelical Christianity, but rejecting the idea of a God that is all-powerful, rejecting the idea of a God that knows the future, affirming human freedom. And if we truly, as human beings, and of course other lesser creatures on the earth, have freedom, then that freedom means that the future is not determined. If we are freely acting creatures, then the future will be what we decide to make of it. And people like, for example, Thomas J. Ord. Tom Ord grew up in the Nazarene Church, which, as you may know, is a fairly conservative church. He taught in their seminary for several years, a couple of decades actually, as a professor of theology, but his growing liberalism made him suspect among the Nazarenes. 2 years ago, he was put on trial and convicted of heresy and kicked out of the church. But he's a prolific writer. Pluriform Love is one of his recent books. He's working on a new one right now that I've read portions of. The Uncontrolling Love of God is another. And this is a really fascinating movement to me to follow on, because Tom Ord is raising questions that our Polish brethren, ancestors, proto-Unitarian ancestors in Poland in the 1560s were raising the same questions. I don't know, maybe your minister, Sean, has mentioned process theology in some of his sermons, I don't know. But this also has a close connection to process theology. But process theology is a whole other sermon. My basic point is that love as the central characteristic of divinity, as a name for what pulls us toward the common good. And that love, in some mysterious way, is not just a human quality, but it's a manifestation of something more basic, more cosmic, something in the fundamental nature of things, whether you call it God or the interdependent web, the seventh principle, or the spiritual foundation of reality. It's where we are moving, and it's where a lot of progressive Christians are moving. Like the word God, love is hard to define, and yet it's a word that draws us in. Jesus never gave us a definition of love. He just showed what it looks like in the living of his life. And for all of their talk, Universalists mostly never tried to define what love is. Like Jesus, they talked about a loving God and left it at that. So maybe love is what we most deeply share with progressive Christians these days. Liberal Christians place their focus on love and justice, just as most of us, we Unitarian Universalists do. Maybe that's the main thing that remains for us of our Christian heritage as Unitarian Universalists, that Jesus' death was never about what Christianity was most insightfully about. That's the wrong turn that Christianity took. And the irony that I see is that we are coming together. We are from different directions. We are approaching, we and progressive Christians, to this idea of the centrality of love. I think Jesus and the Universalists were always right. Right in the lives that we seek to lead lives of goodness and beauty and compassion, and in the communities and societies that we seek to build or to engage with, as your mission statement says, engage with social justice. Beloved communities, communities of fairness, of cooperation, of diversity, of healing, of respect for difference, communities of moral beauty, moral beauty. And in the end, in all of that vision and aspiration, it is indeed love that dwells at the center, and that we now claim should guide us in all that we do. May it ever be so. Amen. We are singing some words of St. Paul, slightly modified.
Please join me in singing Inner Gray Hymnal number 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. This may seem very familiar to you.
And I will be
Every week we ask you for money, so we're going to do that again. Each week we take an offering to support the mission and the work of our fellowship. If you were here in the Great Hall, we will soon pass the offering basket, so please toss in what you can. If you're joining us online, you can mail your gift to Roof, 87 4th Street, Ashland, Oregon, 97520. To give online, you can go to tinyurl.com/RVUUF offering and follow the instructions. To give by text, simply text a $ and the amount you'd like to donate to 551-229-4229. If you need support, please contact the Reverend Sean using the form at Roof. We'll do our best to help. For these gifts and all the gifts you bring to this community and to the world, we thank you.
We're skipping to the final. Number 301 in your gray hymnal, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky. Y'all know this one too. Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores where spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land, our faithful quest to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky.
As we prepare now to depart from one another and from these sacred walls for another week, may we continue to breathe and speak and act with peace and love in a world so sorely in need of both. May we draw from our Christian heritage a vision of healing between all peoples who are estranged, to the end that all who dwell below the skies may know the blessings of love and may then raise their voices in songs of hope and faith, peace and goodwill. Let us join our hearts and hands in a new resolve to make it so. Go in peace.